Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we're going to take a look at the Glock 26. Now, this is a little bit perhaps far off from what you might expect to see here, but there is definitely an interesting backstory here, and we are doing this pistol specifically because the top tier of the Forgotten's Patreon has a perk of, if you tell me what gun you would like to see a video on, I will go ahead and do that one for you as quickly as I can arrange to get access to it. And I just had a fine fellow join up on that Patreon level and request the Glock 26. So we're going to take a look at the 26. Now, this was introduced in 1996, and it is one of the earlier Glocks that was introduced. So the first Glock out there was actually the Model 17. I'll do a full video on this at some point, because actually, when this came out, this wasn't the boring gun that's the same as every other Glock. It was the only Glock, and it did a lot of fairly revolutionary things. So the first version is the 17. They then introduced the 18, which is a full auto version of this. They then introduced the 19, which is the compact model. And by 1996, they had the subcompact versions. So Glock models are all numbered consecutively. So we had 19 was compact, and then you have 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. They're introducing some new calibers. They've got 10 millimeter, they've got 40 Smith & Wesson. When you get to the 20s, you have the 26, the 27, and the 28, which are all basically the same size. They are the subcompact version, a very short grip and a very short slide. This has a just under 3.5-inch barrel. It's an 84 millimeter barrel, 3.43 inches, I believe. And the 26 is this gun in 9 millimeter. The 27 is this gun in 40 Smith & Wesson, and the 28 is not exactly the same frame, but it's this size of gun in 380 automatic. That one was not introduced in the US because it didn't meet US import requirements, and we'll touch on that in a minute because that's relevant to the 26 and the 27 as well. Now, in 1996, when these come out, they weren't the first gun of this size and capacity combination, but there weren't a whole lot of good options out there, and the Glock offered a really compelling option for someone who wanted a very small concealed carry pistol. These are guns that use the same magazines as the larger size, the service and standard compact Glocks in their calibers. So this 26 comes with a 10-round magazine. That's what fits in the grip, but it'll take everything up to and including Glock 18 full auto 33-round magazines. They'll fit just fine. This also offered a really good combination of capacity and size. So at this point, there were a few options for double stack subcompact pistols, but not very many of them. Most of the time, what you had, if you wanted a gun that was going to be about this small, you were going to get a single stack magazine, which in this size means you're going to have a capacity of 5, 6, maybe 7 rounds, or a bigger gun. Or if you want a larger capacity, you're going to be looking at a smaller caliber. And there were smaller caliber ones going way back. The little Savage pistols have 10 rounds, but they're 32 and 380 caliber. Glock, like I said, they're not the first to do this, but like one of the competitors would be one of the subcompact Smith & Wesson 3rd generation automatics. Those things are all steel. The Glock has a polymer frame. You can cut 25, 35% of the weight out of the gun by using Glock. So none of these features are completely new, but putting them all together, you get a small gun with a 10-round, 10+1, in this case, capacity, and relatively lightweight for for what you're getting. It's also worth pointing out this was just 2 years after the passage of the assault weapons ban in the United States, which prohibited the manufacture or importation of magazines that held more than 10 rounds. So the idea of a high-capacity carry pistol was less appealing because it was going to be hard to get magazines greater than 10 rounds. The Glock 26, and to a lesser extent, well, similar extent, the Glock 27, got you exactly at the legal maximum capacity for new production magazines while keeping the gun as small as possible. Again, it was a very, very appropriate for its time pistol. So when these are first introduced, they are essentially generation 2.5, if you're familiar with the Glock generation terms. Let's take a closer look at it, and I'll show you the things they had to do differently in this compared to the previous larger Glocks that had already come out. All right, let's take a closer look here. Of course, like I said, a 3.43-inch barrel, very compact gun, holds a 10-round magazine, and you can see on the standard original magazines you have a hollow finger hook on there to help you get a full grip on it. Without that, and there are magazines that don't have that grip, your pinky finger floats underneath. That's kind of the price of having a very short, compact gun. So there's your standard magazine. We have a couple of interesting ones here as well. So you could also get +2 base plates to bump this up from 10+1 to 12+1. And as you can see here, you don't really add that much volume to the gun as a concealed package. If you're willing to have the finger hook, having the extender on there doesn't really change anything. Now, this one is particularly interesting. I mentioned that these were introduced during the assault weapons ban. This is actually a law enforcement only marked magazine, which is how companies could actually make and sell magazines greater than 10-round capacity. They could just only sell them to police and military. This is a 10-round body that has a +2 extension on it, direct, as built like this from Glock. So this is a 12-round mag, which means during the assault weapons ban, it could only be sold to military and LEO. Just interesting that they did actually make this for a gun that had standard 10-round magazines. Anyway, Glock generations formally really only exist for 4 and 5, but they've become a collector's term for previous ones. So this is a Generation 1 Glock. It's the first iteration of the pistol. Note that it has a basically untextured, I mean, this has texture to it, but it's not grippy at all. And it's a smooth pistol grip, does not have finger grooves. This was the first generation. When they went to the second generation, again, not a formal Glock term, but that's when they added checkering to the back strap of the grips to make the guns a little easier to hold effectively. And then when they went to Generation 3, they added finger grooves in the front and accessory rails for things like flashlights. Now, the subcompact guns never got the accessory rails, but the very first Glock 26, like this one, this is the first pattern, has finger grooves that do not have texturing in them. So normally you would get either texturing without finger grooves or finger grooves with texturing. You don't normally get this combination. That really only exists, that does only exist on the 26 and the 27 like this. And that would last until 1999 to 2000 when they replaced them with the third generation pattern, like this guy, where now you have checkering in those finger grooves. Not exactly a revolutionary, monumental change in the design, but there you have it. Since we're talking about this, when you go to the fourth generation, you still have the finger grooves, but they add these like small pyramid, the rough texturing to the side panels of the grips. The fourth generation gun also adds an enlarged magazine release button that is now reversible from left to right if you want to flip it around. And then the fifth generation gets rid of the finger grooves and adds an ambidextrous slide release. So that's essentially the whole evolution of the Glock 26. And by the way, these guys are actually 27s, but basically interchangeable except for the caliber. One other feature you may notice here that differs between the early large Glocks and the small ones is this groove, this scallop recess in the grips here. This is actually an artifact of the US importation process, or US import law. In the US, there was regulation set up in the 1968 Gun Control Act that prohibited the importation of small, cheap pistols, but it didn't actually address the cost, it just addressed them by features, things like safety elements, sporting purpose elements, and physical size. And if a gun, there's a whole spreadsheet of getting points for various things, how long the gun is, how much it weighs, what caliber it's in, whether it's a locked breech, whether it has adjustable target sights or target grips. Those sorts of things contribute to a gun being seen as having a sporting purpose and thus being importable. Now, if you just took the Glock 17 and scaled it down to this size, it would not get enough points. It's too small, it's too light. This is also why the .380 caliber Glocks have never been imported into the US. They are available here now, but they're only available because they started manufacturing them in the US. They can't import the 380s because, again, they don't get enough points. The 380 caliber doesn't give as many import points as 9mm. In order to make the Glock 26 and 27 meet the requirements for import, these had to have adjustable target sights and target grips. Now, the adjustable sights are easy. They had a cheesy, cheap elevation or a windage adjustable sight that they put on the guns. It got them the points. The guns would be imported in batches and then the sights taken off and replaced with standard fixed sights. And then those adjustable sights get shipped back to Austria to reinstall in the next batch of guns to get them points. Target grips are a little harder on a gun that has a solid polymer frame. How do you do it? Well, this, they managed to convince ATF, is a target thumb rest of a grip. And that's why you have it on Glock 26 and 27, is just to get those couple extra points for importation that allow this pistol to be brought in. So it is important to note that these laws affect importation only. They do not affect manufacture or possession of the guns. It's just about them physically crossing the border. Now let's look at a couple of mechanical elements here. This obviously disassembles just like a Glock. If we look up here on the frame, you can see that this is what's called a 3-pin frame. The early Glocks only had the trigger pin and this pin in the back. Again, here's our first gen example. 1, 2, no pin up there. When they started manufacturing 40 caliber guns, they found that they had problems with the frames potentially cracking here because of the increased power of the 40 compared to 9mm. So they reinforced them with an extra pin through the locking block. Now, for the subcompact pistols, they also had this trouble of how do we slow down the slide quickly enough? Like, this is a very short slide. We need a better spring setup than the standard, just normal spring of the larger size Glocks. And so they developed a double spring like this, where you've got dual spring rates on there, does a better job of slowing down a short compact slide. And there you go. Everything else there is pretty much Glock standard. They are simple. They are reliable. They don't have the greatest triggers. They don't have the greatest sights. Like, they're not really the best at anything, but when you put all the features together, they make a very compelling overall package for a lot of people who just want a gun that works and don't want to have to mess with it. The subcompact, like the Model 26 here, is still a popular configuration for Glock. They sell it in a variety of different calibers. Of course, each caliber has its own distinct model name, but the 26 is still a popular seller for them, and it's now offered in the 5th generation configuration of Glock features in general. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you would like to help support Forgotten Weapons, please do consider checking out the Patreon page. That is why we're covering this particular piece today. If you're interested in some of the other perks, like early access to videos or access to submit Q&A questions, or of course, the one that is available to absolutely everyone at every pledge level on Patreon is a completely ad-free feed of videos every day. So if you're tired of seeing YouTube ads, that's one way to support the channel and not see them on Forgotten Weapons content again. Thanks for watching.